Writers getting inspired from their own life is a common phenomenon. Throughout all the regions, we can see that the works of Hemingway, Stephen King, and J.K. Rowling were inspired by their personal experiences. But there was this one novella which stands out for me. It didn't feel like a story, but felt more like a confession in a person's diary. He was the Gen Z's favorite writer whose works were widely read even after decades after his death. He is none other than the Franz Kafka himself. One morning, Grahar Samsa awoke from an uneasy dream in which he found himself transformed into a gigantic insect. With that line, Kafka opened a story which would define the literature of the 20th century. But what if it was not just a story? What if it was Kafka himself writing his own disguised autobiography? Kafka was born in 1883 in Prague, a German speaking Jew in a city divided by culture and class. His father, Hermann Kafka, was a force of nature, strong, loud, and ambitious. Meanwhile, Kafka grew up as a quiet, fragile, and intellectual, all of which disgusted his father. To his father, he was weak and disappointment. To Kafka, his father was a giant shadow he couldn't escape. By day, he worked as a clerk at a workers' insurance institute, which was bureaucratic, polite, and drudgery. By night, he wrote feverishly until dawn, driven by something he couldn't explain. He once said, "Writing is a sweet and a wonderful reward." But for what? His office life felt like imprisonment. In Metamorphosis, Graher's room becomes his cage, just as Kafka felt in his own life. When Grahar becomes an insect, his family recoils in horror. His father threw apples at him, which pierced his back and leaves a wound. His sister, once his only comfort, stopped visiting him, and slowly Grahar died due to starvation in his room. Kafka too felt unseen by those closest to him. His genius was in isolation. His writings were his language, which no one could understand. Grahar's death was not only a tragedy, it was Kafka's truth, the end of the life unlived but deeply felt. Kafka's body began to fail him. He suffered from tuberculosis, which ate away his lungs, the same way guilt and self doubt eaten his spirit. But it didn't stop him from writing. His notebooks filled with strange, incomplete stories. He wrote feverishly about guilt, transformation, and punishment. In his own words, he found a strange freedom in writing. Writing was the only comfort he had in all of his life. For Kafka, the insect was not just a creature of horror, it was a confession, a mirror of fragile body, his alienation, his wish to escape. Through writing, Kafka metamorphosed his pain into a meaning. When you first read Metamorphosis, what was your initial thoughts?
Um, it was quite brilliant, actually. I think the author Kafka, he describes, the story basically revolves around a man who wakes up as a bug and suddenly his entire family leaves him. And the besides the fact it was how bizarre it was, that the initial concept itself, it was kind of was genius from Kafka. The story was kind of genius because the way he metaphorically constructed himself into a story, and it showed it could the audience could feel the alienation and the estrangement from that the character felt from with his father and from his entire life itself, the alienation he felt from his entire life. So it was quite brilliant on Kafka's work to conceptualize something so such a like what's that very basic human feeling, as basic as alienation, that we all experience in our current society right now, alienation as a thing. So it was a pretty good read actually on top, like overall. And I also noticed that Kafka also mentioned that that creature, that so-called creature in that story, was not really a cockroach or a vermin per se, and he left it up to the interpretation of the reader to know what it is, because he left it as an abstract thing that we had to interpret or something. And yeah, it was quite metaphorical, the entire thing. And the abstract thing that he left out also was a very good touching, good touch on behalf of the author, that readers could like conceptualize and try to think about it. It leaves the reader hanging on what he actually just read. So yeah, it was nice.
In 1924, at the age of 40, he died. Before his death, he begged his friend Max Brod to burn everything he had written. Fortunately for us, Broadus refused, for which the world was thankful to him. Kafka never saw success in his lifetime. He never had an applause or appreciation from anyone. Yet today, his words echo in every story about identity, alienation, and despair. From insect to immoral, his true metamorphosis has just begun. The metamorphosis was never just about a bug or his bizarre plot. It was always about Kafka transforming his own suffering into the art. His curse became his voice. His isolation becomes his immortality. It has always been Kafka writing his own story metamorphically. Hence, the metamorphosis was indeed Kafka's disguised autobiography.